I would say as an American that if we're going to get behind a regime change, it should be in Israel first. So that would be my position. I think the position of a lot of people who are waking up to the fact that Zionism has brought us nothing but grief in America. Can you name one positive thing that Zionists have contributed to America? That Zionists have contributed to America? That Zionists have contributed to America?
You are implacably opposed to what both Israel and now the United States have done here. Why?
Yeah. Because, well, first and foremost, just on the MAGA movement level, Trump came out and he gave us a promise that we were not going to be involved in wars. And I'm going back to 2015. Why did people get so excited about Donald Trump, who was then an unlikely candidate, who was being smeared by the media as being Adolf Hitler? Well, it was because he recognized that the American people were being forgotten while we were giving billions of unaccounted billions, by the way, for these never-ending wars. And so it's one of the earliest reasons that people got behind him and got behind his vision. And so we're opposed to a regime change because America as a country has a lot of problems that need to be fixed here first. It's that simple.
Right, but it's not quite that simple. And I'll explain to you why. Because Donald Trump, I think he's not been inconsistent in the sense that in his first term, he wasn't a pacifist. You know, he killed General Soleimani, he killed Baghdadi, the head of ISIS, and went after them ferociously. He attacked Syria when they killed American troops. He dropped a massive bomb in Afghanistan. It wasn't like he never deployed the American military. And again here, what he would argue, and has been arguing, is he's not declared war on anybody. What he's done is very specifically target Iran's nuclear capability because of latest reports coming out which said they had taken the enrichment of their uranium stocks from 3.5% to 60%, and that therefore the leap to weaponization was moving at a pace that couldn't be tolerated. I gotta say, I kind of agree. Now, if he suddenly commits, troops on the ground, then that becomes a different thing altogether. But even when Trump talked about regime change, I think he meant from within, as we saw in Syria in December, where the people themselves rise up. And if that was to happen, why would that be a bad thing?
Okay, so you're asking a lot of questions here. So first and foremost, the idea that you have to formally declare war on like a piece of paper in order for war to happen is a little bit ridiculous. I mean, he dropped bombs. He dropped bombs in Iran. So yes, we are a part of this war, whether we like it or not. Iran is now speaking and saying that they're going to shut down the Hormuz Strait. There's going to be impact on oil.
Why would they do that? Why would they do that when the main victim of doing that would be Iran? I mean, 50% of China, of the traffic of stuff through there is for China, which is one of their allies.
Don't care, not my business. The point that I'm making here is that to make the assumption that you can just drop bombs on a country and then say, well, you know what, we didn't formally declare war is patently ridiculous. I think that is just patently ridiculous.
What about when he killed General Soleimani, one of Iran's top military commanders?
Sure, an assassination, a strike, and that, of course, came with some risk. It's a little bit different to be flying out B-6 bombers in the middle of the night and dropping bombs at the behest of Bibi Netanyahu, which brings me to the second point. The reason that America wants a regime change in Iran is because Bibi Netanyahu is demanding it. And that answers the question as to why there is this split in the MAGA movement. What we are seeing right now is the infiltration of Israel first people, the neocons, people who have always wanted never-ending wars, and the people who have recognized that following Israel's foreign policy initiatives has led to America being on the decline. And so that's where I stand. I am with the MAGA people who grew up, I call us Generation 9/11, who were told that America was going to be rendered safer, cleaner. All we had to do was agree to go to, well, ironically, war with Iraq because of weapons of mass destruction. It's all of the same rhetoric dating back to 9/11, all of the same tactics of trying to smear people who are against this war as supporting jihadists. It is not my business to affect a regime change in Iran. It's simply not our business. It doesn't impact us one way or the other. And we also are completely done with the idea that with this decades-long idea that we're doing it to spread democracy because we believe in international liberalism. There was no imminent threat to the United States when Trump made this decision to do what Bibi wanted. And I want to be clear here. This was not Trump's decision. It was Bibi Netanyahu's decision. And that is the reason that he did it. And we're very aware that Israel is dictating our foreign policy, and we would now like that to stop.
Okay, but you wouldn't disagree, presumably, that Iran has been the main sponsor of terrorism in the Middle East through the Houthis, through Hezbollah, through Hamas. I mean, that's widely accepted and recognized. They've done
Widely accepted. No, that's just kind of...
Really? You don't think they have?
Has been a terrorist state. Okay, Israel right now is imparting a genocide and a Holocaust on the Gazan people. So I'm really over this idea like somehow Israel has the moral high ground and we have to get behind them.
I didn't say
because
that.
We got to go after the bad guys.
I wasn't saying that.
But we have.
Oh, hang on. Look, we can come to Gaza where I think we'll reach agreement about what Israel's government's been doing there in the last few months. Without
but it's relevant. If you're going to call Iranians terrorists, if they right now had an open concentration camp where they were mass killing their own people, we would all be saying this is ridiculous. So it's rich to me that people are concerned about Iran having nukes. But I'm concerned about Israel, who won't even admit that they have nukes, having nukes, while at the same time, they are executing a genocide and a Holocaust in Gaza that the world is watching. So who's the bigger terrorist is the question today. I would say as an American that if we're going to get behind a regime change, it should be in Israel first. So that would be my position. I think the position of a lot of people who are waking up to the fact that Zionism has brought us nothing but grief in America. Can you name one positive thing that Zionists have contributed to America? That us fighting these perpetual wars on behalf of Zionism has contributed to America?
But can you also recognize that Israel, placed where it is as a tiny thumbprint in the middle of a region where you have massive countries full of a lot of people that want to wish them harm, and in the case of the terror groups like Hamas, Hezbollah, the Houthis, actually want to get rid of Israel and all Israelis altogether, can you accept that if you have a huge nation like Iran with 90 million people, and they are facilitating the terror groups to that purpose, that Iran has to defend itself? Now, I would not disagree with you about what has been going on in Gaza in the last few months. I've been very vocal in my criticism of that. Nor do I disagree, by the way, that it wouldn't help Israel if they did have regime change and Netanyahu wasn't prime minister anymore. So on those points, I think we have agreement. But I come back to the fact that the reason Trump has done this, I think, is that he has for a long time said Iran cannot have a nuclear bomb. I think he's absolutely right to believe that would be a pretty terrifying escalation of the power of a country that's been so wedded to terrorism in the region. And I think he took the action for that reason. So I don't really agree that he's only doing it because Bibi Netanyahu wants him to go along and do it. I think he's doing it because he believes it's in America's strategic interest that Iran does not have a nuclear weapon.
It is not in America's strategic interest. There was no imminent threat. He could have taken this to Congress and he could have allowed the people's representatives to vote on whether or not
but nobody does
it was
that.
in the American people.
No president in living memory has, with almost zero exceptions, has bothered to get congressional pre-approval for military strikes. We know that. You know that.
Yeah, we know that. And that's not okay. By the way, that's not okay.
Obama did more strikes than anybody, right?
Yes,
I mean, Obama never asked anybody for any permission.
I'm not an Obama supporter. Yeah, that doesn't make it okay. By the way, like that argument, just so we're clear, saying, well, we've been doing it wrong forever, so we should just keep doing it wrong, is not an argument that's right.
I don't disagree with you about that.
Okay, so I disagree with Obama doing it. I disagree with Trump doing it.
Enough.
And especially when what we're talking about is what could rise to be a nuclear war, right? We should have done things the right way. And he had indicated that he was going to wait 2 weeks, and then he didn't wait 2 weeks because Bibi Netanyahu, at least according to the Israeli press, if you believe it, said, we're not waiting 2 weeks, we want this done immediately. But I will say, you are correct. He's not just doing this because Bibi Netanyahu demands it. He's also doing it because Miriam Adelson demands it. He took $100 million from Miriam Adelson. It was very clear what she wanted. She was clear that she wanted to annex the West Bank. So there was an imperialist plan that was put into place. And unfortunately, when you do a deal with the devil, you're going to have to eventually deliver the pound of flesh. And that is what Trump is doing, in my opinion. And more evidence of that is the fact when he tweeted that there could be a Trump hotel in Gaza. I mean, that was truly in my opinion, the most inhumane thing he's ever tweeted.
Well, I think it was pretty clear what he was. I think what he was doing there was pretty clear. He's saying he wants a better life for Palestinian people, a life where they have beaches,
well, when you
and they
pair
have
that
hotels,
with Jared
and they have golf
Kushner
courses.
and Jared Kushner's private equity firm and their ties to what's happening in Israel, and Jared Kushner being on camera shortly after October 7th saying, wow, that property could be worth a lot of money, it makes me a little bit uncomfortable. It makes Americans a little bit uncomfortable. Now, you've asked me to come onto your show to explain to you how the now very fractured MAGA movement is feeling, and I'm telling you that, right?
No, it's really. I find, honestly,
I do also.
I find it really. I find the
question.
split in the conservative movement in America genuinely fascinating, because it
and
really
it's
is a
only going one
genuine schism
direction.
now.
Yeah, there's a genuine schism, and it's only going one direction. And by the way, we shouldn't even call this a schism, because trying to dress this up and delude us into believing that the MAGA movement it is what has Meghan McCain cheering, John Bolton cheering, has Mark Levin cheering. The literal faces of the Never Trump movement are saying this is real MAGA. Yeah, we're not going to be that delusional.
But you're on the same side as Alexandra Ocasio-Cortez. How do you feel about that?
You're asking about the MAGA movement. The MAGA movement has always been a movement that explicitly did not want to keep involving our sons and daughters in the Middle East. So we have not changed that position. If AOC was always anti-war, then she should have thrown on a red hat in 2020 and in 2015 and joined the MAGA movement. That would have been fantastic.
But are you saying America should never use any military action? You're on the same side
as Greta Thunberg when it comes to the Palestinians being
but are you saying,
murdered
Candace,
every day.
are you saying,
I am. I'm aligned.
Okay, but are you saying that America should never use any military action then?
No. I'm not saying America can never use any military action. In fact, what I said earlier was I could get behind a regime change in Israel, because I think it would fix a lot of issues that are happening and that has been happening to America over time.
But why wouldn't you want it in Iran? I mean, I'm reading an Amnesty International report from 2024.
Because Iran is not negatively impacting. I'm answering your question because Iran's regime is not negatively impacting America on a day-to-day basis.
When the leader of Iran says death to America, why doesn't that concern you?
That's a chant. And by the way, I want to be very clear. Why are they chanting death to America? Why are they chanting that? That's kind of a random thing. Like, I don't wake up one day and go like,
dead?
But why are they specifically chanting as opposed to saying, I don't know, death to China or death to Russia? What is it specifically about America?
Well, they say death to America, death to Israel, death to the United Kingdom, actually.
Oh, okay.
Death to pretty much anyone that wants to stand up to them.
Could have had something to do with our actions in the Middle East, is why I'm saying that we need a change in foreign policy. It maybe has something to do with just like killing 1 million Iraqi civilians, because Bibi Netanyahu got on a congressional stage and said there are weapons of mass destruction, and we took that to the bank and there actually were no weapons of mass destruction, so we just killed 1 million. It could have something, I could be crazy, it could have something to do with our actions in the Middle East. The fact that we have 2,000 troops stationed in Syria right now under the guise of saying that we're fighting ISIS, while at the same time we know that Bibi Netanyahu funded the Al-Qaeda adjacent front because he wanted to overthrow Syria, and they again expand their borders, immediately take on territory and sell us absolute nonsense. We're talking about funding Hamas. Bibi Netanyahu funded Hamas. There is footage of Bibi Netanyahu saying this stuff on camera. So it's just so ridiculous to me to pretend that they're in some predicament, that they may be eradicated soon, which is why they have to keep funding all of these terrorist groups and then pretending that they're victims of terror, when in fact they are the people that are imparting it worldwide. I just think that, like I said, Generation 9/11 has grown up, and I think that our eyes are very clear here, and we recognize that our relationship with Israel has become increasingly problematic, and it always was problematic. So I'll again ask the questions, Piers. I'm asking you because we're having a conversation. Name something positive that our Zionist AIPAC foreign policy has brought to America.
Well, I think the positive side of, if you want an answer about that, is that America has been Israel's steadfast ally because it recognizes as a country that Israel has been under an almost unique, multifaceted threat on its border for a very long time from people that want to destroy it. That you may not see that as a benefit, but Israel has been very supportive to the United States in many ways. Right, so why shouldn't America?
I just want something concrete that has been benefit. Like, we got better in America in this way. Just name something. Gas prices, just something that the average American can relate to.
Well, you're not going to have a correlation between Zionism and gas prices in America. Of course, you're not.
No, I'm just giving you an example to just tell me one thing that
tangible
because what your argument here is like, well, you get a pat on the back and you can say that you helped this country, which was formed in 1948 by pretending to be refugees, if you will, and being invited into the homes of Palestinians, the horrific story
Well, they weren't
of what
pretending to be
happened.
refugees. They were people fleeing a Holocaust.
Let's be clear. Let me finish my statement.
What do you mean
When I say
pretending to be refugees?
Let me finish my statement. When I say pretending to be refugees and being invited into the home, you would think that these people were helpless and were going to be grateful to the people that hosted them. People like Muhammad Hadid, Bella Hadid and Gigi Hadid's father, who was an infant at this time in his mother's arms. She had just given birth. They had invited these refugees because of the goodness of their heart. And then one day they return home and their doors are locked and they are told that if you try to enter, you are going to be shot and killed. That is the reality of how Israel was established as a state. Okay, that is not a stain that you can wipe from history. Most Americans growing up actually believe what happened was that, okay, it was a little messy. That's what happens after wars. Borders get changed. But at the very least, they were given money. I mean, you've lived here for hundreds of years. Here's money for your property. No, that's not what happened. They were forced out of their homes at gunpoint.
Listen,
and it's wrong. So we get to be the nation pat on the back. According to you, the thing that America gets. Let me finish. I'm going to let you finish. It's your show. We can. But let me finish. Your argument is that what we get to be is that nation that keeps supporting it as they continue to move their borders in this way. Now we're seeing that incursion into Gaza, and we are certainly going to see it by the end of this administration in the West Bank. Because, like I said, that is why Miriam Adelson gave Trump $100 million.
Look, as you know, I oppose what the Israeli government is doing now in Gaza. I oppose the expansion of settlements on the West Bank. I think all of that is completely wrong. I do think America supports Israel because it remains the only democracy in the Middle East, and that's an important...
They're not a democracy. Stop saying that, Pierce. You know better.
Well, they have elections.
It's not a democracy.
They have elections.
But who gets to vote in those elections? Do the Gazans get to vote in that election?
Well, the Israelis get to vote in Israel, obviously.
Okay, so you're basically saying America had a democracy, when we had
Israel
laws
ceded
that said Black Americans couldn't, Black Americans
Israel
couldn't
moved
vote.
out. It is indisputable that Israel moved out of Gaza in 2005, and there was an election, and Hamas got elected. Right now,
yeah,
I
and
agree.
that's because
I agree with you. I agree with
but Bibi Netanyahu was on camera saying that they were going to fund Hamas into power. So they orchestrated that because they wanted to create the solution.
I'm finished. I agree with you that Netanyahu wanted to cause a split between the Palestinian Authority and Hamas. It was divide and rule. It was a catastrophically bad strategy, and it led to what happened on October the 7th over a 20-year period. There's no doubt it was a terrible thing that Netanyahu did, one of the many reasons I think he should go. But there was no doubt that the Israelis pulled out of Gaza and allowed them to have elections, and they elected Hamas, and the rest has been disastrous history.
Because the Israelis funded, because Bibi Netanyahu, they funded Hamas into power.
I don't disagree with you, but they still had elections.
So it's like we rigged an election, but look what the election results show is that they wanted to put Hamas into power. And so when we talk about who is funding these terrorists, the answer is Bibi Netanyahu. And I don't want to get into his corruption trials, but every single person watching this right now should go pursue the documentary, The Bibi Files, because it is absolutely stunning to understand.
I believe one of the reasons. I believe one of the reasons. Let me
answer the question, because you still haven't given me anything other than like you guys get a pat on the back for supporting this created nation in the Middle East. I also just like to say all of the bad things that we have gotten because of our continued relation with Israel. First and foremost, the open borders. And you can relate to this. People in the UK, they just can't seem to connect the dots.
All right.
Oh my gosh, what's happening here?
Get a word in.
But I want to say this. Okay, we don't understand where all these refugees are coming from. Oh my God, where are all these refugees coming from? Who's funding them coming over into these borders? Well, this is what you get when you keep supporting these nonstop wars, when you keep bombing where these people live. And it's not even just a conspiracy, by the way. If you're like, oh, well
actually, you're wrong about this, because the vast majority of people coming into the UK illegally are not coming from war-torn countries in the Middle East. They're actually economic migrants. So that's not true.
Okay, but let's connect that. Let's connect that. When you say economic migrants, are we talking about like
people who literally want to come to the UK for a better life?
And when Gaddafi was heading up Libya and the country was on the up and up, and he was working with the United Nations, and then all of a sudden he warned that if you collapse Libya and turn it into a place where refugees are escaping, that this is going to be your problem, Europe. He warned that. So then it actually happened, and now we're just calling them economic migrants. We're going to pretend that we had nothing to do.
I'm not talking about people coming from Libya.
Okay, where are you speaking about?
Well, for example, I think it was last year, a third of all the people who came into the UK on the border on the small boats illegally, it turned out were young economic migrant males from Albania, which last time I checked, we hadn't invaded. So look, let me pull you back to something you said, which has caused a lot of controversy, which is this issue of dishonorable discharges. Take a listen.
I do believe that if war in Iran is on the agenda, and that appears so, get dishonorably discharged. Who cares? Who cares? Why should you go die in a foreign land? You now have the benefit of 2020. You can see, think about those men and those women who died because they were pitched that they were serving their country because there were weapons of mass destruction, right? They were serving their country because the Taliban, they were serving their country, whatever, and these people gave up their lives. And ask yourselves, for what? And the answer to that question is for the elites. They're like toy soldiers.
When you said that, were you aware of the repercussions if people dishonorably discharged?
So just to put this into context, this is like the Q&A, live Q&A portion at the end of my show. And being facetious, but also being completely honest, that they should begin to consider, and that was somebody asking, what should we do? Like, should we leave the military? Because they also
do you regret
are recognizing
that?
No, I don't regret saying that. I don't
But
regret
you know the
having
repercussions if you do
think
discharge dishonorably.
Okay, well, I would imagine that the people that are in the military who were going to, if they were going to listen to my podcast and they were going to dishonorably discharge, that they would know the consequences. So it's completely ridiculous. And again, we see this over and over again where people can't answer the broader questions. They try to suddenly peg in, well, you said this one thing. No, the broader conversation that we are having.
Candace, it's not a small thing.
No, let me finish. Let me finish.
You're basically, you're encouraging US servicemen and women to dishonorably discharge.
You play a clip and I'm trying to answer it. You know, you can't do that. You ask a question.
Well, you're trying to downplay it.
And I'm responding. No, I am. No, you're trying to upplay it is what the issue is. This is exactly.
I'm just repeating what you said.
No, you're not. You're playing what I said, and I'm responding to it and telling you that the broader piece of that conversation, when you have troops that are now asking that question, is they are recognizing that America is in steep decline, that our military comes back and they are treated like dirt, that a lot of these men, and we're talking about decades, white American males come back and they're told that they're racist and they're treated like crap, that they're white supremacists, that they have a different vision for this country. So why are they dying in these overseas wars for Bibi Netanyahu? Okay, and let me again try to answer that question that I asked you at the beginning, which is, what has Zionism won America?
I'm not going
what
to keep coming back to the same thing.
No, let me finish. Why won't you let me answer that? Why won't you let me actually say what people are recognizing? You come back and there are open borders and you're told that you are racist, okay? You come back and you're told that you are racist if you don't want open borders. Meanwhile, you're sent overseas to defend Israel's borders. It's a nonsense. And who's funding these open borders? According to Barry Weiss, and I quote, Barry Weiss said this verbatim, the Jewish connection to the refugee is not a conspiracy. That's something that we are very proud of. And she was referencing the organization HIAS, and she says it explicitly, which she said what was started by them in the 1880s, which includes immigrants that have come in like Sergey Brin. They are still the organization that is operating at our border right now, okay? That is problematic, that we have open borders while we continually and routinely are told that we have to defend somebody else's borders, okay? And again, these never-ending wars in the Middle East at the behest of Israel. Bibi Netanyahu is the one that called for Americans to invade Iraq, Libya, Syria, Afghanistan, and now Iran, and we've done it. We're told Israel can defend itself, okay? But why do we have currently 2,000 troops that are in Syria under the guise of fighting ISIS? And like I said, we know Israel themselves fund terror-adjacent militants like they did to overthrow Assad. And we're done with the BS of, okay, well, they weren't really involved, Israel, in Afghanistan, because even when we fight those never-ending wars, Israel wins. Everybody knows that our boys were out there in Afghanistan guarding poppy fields, okay? And do you know what happened after we allegedly, quote unquote, lost in Afghanistan? What happened to all those poppy fields, those poppy flowers that our military was guarding? Well, the opioid crisis hit America via the Sackler family, who quite literally built the School of Medicine at Tel Aviv University. So we're just done, okay? And there's no way that we're gonna go backwards. We're not going to allow you guys to emotionally condition us to go, oh, well, we gotta protect Israel because of the Holocaust. It is over. They're imparting a Holocaust. America would like off this crazy train.
Okay, for the benefit of viewers who don't know what I was talking about, under the Uniform Code of Military Justice, Article 19, dishonourable discharge can result in forfeiture of all pay and allowances up to 5 years confinement, which is a pretty heavy penalty to pay.
Yeah, I'd want my kids to go to jail before they fought for Israel. I'll say that honestly.
Okay,
I would. I have 3 sons, and I'm going to be honest with you, Pierce. I'm glad you told me that consequence. I'd take that consequence any day to them being sent back over in a coffin because they died for Israel. So.
Okay, but I think the one thing you're missing, look, I come from a big military family, a lot of military in my family, and a lot of people fighting wars on behalf of the United States are not doing it because they think Bibi Netanyahu wants them to. They're doing it because
some of them do that, and they write into my show and I answer the question.
But many of them won't, and they might be offended by you suggesting that's the only reason they're doing it.
And they can watch your show, and they can be offended all they want, but I think it's more offensive the way that our military is treated, the veterans are treated, and the gaslighting that takes place when we're told that we have to defend everybody's borders, but our own.
I actually think America treats its veterans better than almost any country in the world.
I mean, this has always been an open conversation, and I'm just saying that if my boys were being drafted to fight this war in Iran, I would be like, you know what, honey, take the other option. And that's not because it's cowardice, it's because when you sign up for the military.
Okay, but I would say that the pilots,
you are pledging that you are doing something that is going to better your country.
Candace,
and like I said, our country has been in steep decline since we have been part of this foreign policy, which is just whatever Israel wants.
Okay, but you made that point. But what I would say to you is the only people so far that have been involved from the American military were the extraordinarily courageous and skillful pilots who flew these B-2 bombers and attacked the nuclear sites and got back safely. So there's been no troops on the ground committed at all, no declaration of war by the United States. We can quibble. Listen, I don't disagree with you. You bomb somewhere, you probably are at war with them. But there is no official declaration of war, just as Trump, when he took out Soleimani and Baghdadi and he attacked Syria and so on, he didn't declare war on those places. And actually it turned out that the apocalyptic warnings of those actions never materialized. So we shall see. I can't let you go without asking. Let me ask you just quickly about the Tucker Ted Cruz debate. What did you make of that?
Fantastic. It is finally the debate that needed to happen in America, because a part of this nonstop policy is this belief, as you said, Ted Cruz, that if we just do whatever Israel wants, that God's going to bless you. And it's quite ironic because it comes from Protestants, and their normal argument is that the reason why we had to have this fracture in the church was because of indulgences. There's nothing more indulgent than I'm going to be blessed if I just do whatever Israel says. And so because we are finally having that spiritual conversation, which is more important, I suspect there's going to be major changes in the United States going forward, and that is why you're seeing this fracture in the base already.
Tucker, according to Donald Trump, Tucker rang Trump to apologize for some of the more strident rhetoric he's used against him recently. Are you done with Donald Trump, or could you see a way that you would end up perhaps voting for him? Oh, yeah, he can't run again, obviously, but would you support him publicly again?
So I want to be clear, I don't regret voting for Donald Trump above Kamala. I think he was the better candidate, certainly a better candidate above Joe Biden. But what I will say is that he's been a chronic disappointment, and I feel embarrassed that I told people to go vote for him because this wasn't going to happen, and it is happening. But I just think that the picture of politics in America is going to look very differently because of his actions. So I don't know where we go from here. I really don't. But this is not the candidate that I voted for.
If it turns out that his instincts were right, that by doing what he did, it brings Iran to the negotiating table and they do a deal on their nuclear plans, would you admit that you were wrong in that circumstance?
Yeah. I will always admit when I'm wrong. Anybody that listens to my podcast knows that. It just so happens to be that, especially if I come on the Piers Morgan show and I make some predictions, that it ends up that I'm right. So I'm feeling lucky, but I will of course admit I'm wrong if that is the result.
Do you condemn Rupert Murdoch?
I'm not talking about Rupert Murdoch.
Do you condemn Rupert Murdoch?
I'm not talking about Rupert Murdoch.
This has never been shown on British media. This is a letter from Netanyahu's political office. And Bridget may well recognize the handwriting of Benjamin Netanyahu here. It is a list of individuals that Netanyahu considered to be funders of his political campaign. There is a name on this list. The name is Rupert Murdoch. Your employer.
You know what, Loki?
It seems he funded Benjamin Netanyahu. That's an issue.
You know what, Loki? It's not an issue for me.
It's an issue, and actually it's in the interest of objectivity
understand one thing.
that you stated.
Rupert Murdoch can speak for himself. You've got a problem with him, take it up with him.
I do.
I can tell you categorically, he has never had a single conversation with me about anything I've put on Piers Morgan Uncensored.
Sam kindly resigned from the Times newspaper because of Murdoch's investment and bias towards
you have a
Israel.
problem,
This document, this letter,
you're a rapper,
clearly
right?
shows Benjamin Netanyahu noting Rupert Murdoch, considering him to be a funder of his political campaign.
You're a rapper, yeah?
That's an issue.
You're a rapper. You condemn P. Diddy.
Yes.
Great. You see how easy it is? You take it out of your obsession, which is that you hate Israel so much you can't condemn anything that people do to them.
We see the situation differently.
Not really.
My loyalty is to the people.
I agree with you a lot more. I agree with you a lot more than you realise.
I view myself as loyal to the people of the camps, to the people under the bombs. I do not view myself as loyal to somebody that would end up on a list of potential funders of Benjamin Netanyahu.
I like Rupert Murdoch enormously. I respect him enormously. And if you
won't condemn his funding of Murdoch, of Netanyahu.
What's your thoughts? Please be respectful with your comments. Also, please click the like, click the notification bell, and subscribe to this channel.
Listen, Genesis chapter 11 verse 10 explains the genealogy of Shem. Shem was a black man in Africa. If you repeat this back, Genesis 14 verse 13, Abraham steps on the scene. Being a descendant of Shem, which is a fact, means Abraham too was Abraham, born in the city of a black man called Nimrod, grandson of Ham. Ham had 4 sons. One was named Canaan. Here, let me do some explaining. Abraham, Isaac was Jacob had 12 sons. For real, and these were the children of Israel, according to Genesis chapter 10. These were the children of Israel, according to Genesis chapter 10. These were the children of Israel, according to Genesis chapter 10.